But first now, I present to you the young scholars and their poster presentations. And we start with Maria NYSTRÖM from the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. Maria, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to start by putting up my presentation here. So there we go. I think you can see it now.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes, on my screen, it's all right.
Great. So my name is Maria NYSTRÖM. As Paul said here, I'm a PhD student at the Department of Conservation at the University of Gothenburg. And currently I'm just finishing my PhD thesis, which investigates contemporary management and development of the Swedish ecclesiastical heritage, with a particular focus on the professional roles within the heritage field. And this contribution, my contribution today, is based on a case study from my PhD thesis. And it will demonstrate how heritage can be used as a resource when regenerating rural parish churches in Sweden. So the results of this case study show that a fruitful collaboration between the heritage sector and the religious congregation can benefit the church and the local community equally. So, so similar to the situation of many other European countries, the historic churches of Sweden face a lot of new challenges at present. In rural and depopulated areas of the country, parishes and communities are struggling to manage the churches and have them remain open and accessible. These areas are experiencing dramatic demographic changes as people increasingly choose to live in larger cities. And at the same time, the local parishes are losing members and funds. As a response to this development, new strategies are being developed which connect actors from the heritage field and the religious congregations. And it's these projects that I am examining further. So the case study here, it's located in the village of Hamra in mid-Sweden. You can see on the map here. It's a small community. It has about 80 permanent residents. And as jobs have vanished in this area with the formerly important timber industry, many have chosen to leave this region to seek out other opportunities elsewhere. But remaining in this village is the 19th century Hamra church that you can see on the left. At present, this church is rarely open for services or visitors. Still, it remains, as many other churches in Sweden do, in a very good material condition. So the owner of the church, that is the parish of Ljusnan, became involved in a regional regeneration project together with a regional museum based by the coast in mid-Sweden, which is called Hälsinglands Museum. And this project, it aimed to find new and extended uses of the church and to explore ways of using it as a resource for development and regeneration for the local community. Through the course of this project, it faced a number of challenges. These included uncertain professional boundaries and responsibilities of different actors. It included the remote location of the church and also, of course, scarce economic resources. Furthermore, the collaboration between a regional museum and a parish from the Church of Sweden was not seen as entirely uncontroversial by other actors in the heritage field. But despite these obstacles, the case study demonstrates how the museum and the parish managed to incorporate both secular and religious objectives in a process of regional development. Through the project, local heritage stories were emphasized, and the church was used as a venue for the local community. The activities of the project included various cultural events, such as exhibitions and craft workshops that were hosted in Hamra Church. while the parish provided resources in the community in the form of the church. The museum connected the parish and the village with regional cultural actors. So to conclude this brief presentation, the context of regional development allowed the parish and the museum alike to explore new roles. The museum demonstrated an interesting potential in Swedish ecclesiastical heritage management as a facilitator between the church, the parish, and other actors within the cultural heritage field. And even more importantly, the local heritage that was found here functioned as a mediating factor between the secular and the religious values within the project. So thank you very much. That was my presentation.
Thank you. So you can, okay, close the, and the next presentation is by RÖTA, and now I have a problem. GINIÜNAITÄ. Can you pronounce your name for me, RÖTA? Can you?
Hello, my name is RÖTA GINIÜNAITÄ. GINIÜNAITÄ.
Okay, and you are studying on the Gregoriana in Rome, but you are not an Italian.
Yes, I'm not Italian, I'm a Lithuanian, and I will as well present a Lithuanian case, but from a perspective from a University of Pontifical Gregorian University. So, yes, I'm Lithuanian.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for acceptance and for this invitation. And my PhD thesis is the new dignity of disused churches, counter the throwaway culture. So this is my thesis, which I started 3 years ago and I'm working on. And it is very related to the Catholic Church position and the Pope Francis position. And this is methodological aspect, how to study and how to use these places. My task is to ask, what is my task to face up this problem of decommissioned churches? And there is another thing that I suppose there exists from my background, which I will present, that there's a risk to guide to concrete model of reuse and to choose an actual temporal necessity. So the point is that I found out the object totality of the disused churches, and I want to educate how to look at this problem. Why I started this is one of the church from Lithuania in Vilnius, capital of Lithuania, and I started my my PhD from observing of this church, because this church, this building, during the Soviet regime divided to floors, and this is the invasion, let's say, of Soviet regime. Then this building was converted to warehouse. So in Lithuania we have, as mostly other countries of East Europe, changed building during last 50 years ago in the 20th century, changed to the function. Now with the intervention we see in these photos, now there's activity and the questions how to use this building. But 50 years ago, this was, as you see, this construction, the building, even if it's the church of the Baroque style, inside we see the constructions of the floors, but as an elevation as well. We see from the 20th century, from the Soviet regime. So we have already the heritage of the reusing of churches now, and with the consequences now, and we can observe this as to analyze how history already done many functions as well, not in for the spiritual or religious use, but for the practical use, no? And so now what another church is as well in another city, the second city of Lithuania, is as well divided for the theater, you know, for the cinema. It was made the hall for cinema. So then this is another example in Vilnius, capital of Lithuania. Then was, let's say, in these cases, they left what was damaged by the Soviet regime and now adapt something new in this last some years. You know, it's very recent. But here we have the museum. So we had destroyed a space, and now we have the museum of church heritage. So then I reflected these examples, how the church space was reused. It made me to think, you know, if it is good to start to think about concrete function, you know, and maybe it's, you know, because many different approaches and theories how to change this from what kind of point of view to choose to think about this churches, about the spaces of its churches, you know, and this historical, artistic, spiritual, social point of view. And, you know, it's the view, the gaze on this churches make process for the methodology, you know. And this is the point that I started to think about this, because we had as well the doesn't God dwell upon the church, the conference organized by Vatican, you know, and one of the speakers spoke about the social space, you know, as the interaction between religion and social space. So that is that it's difficult to say that, you know, that the religion is only in that space where it's in the beginning. It's the process, you know, the religious space in the process. You can find in many different places. It's in process. So, but what to do with that spaces? And Pope Francis, in his message in this conference, which I mentioned, which was two years ago, and he said, no, that we have initiating process rather than possessing spaces, you know. So it's not about thinking about what to do in these spaces, but to priority to action which generates new process in society and engage other persons and groups who can develop them to the point where they bear fruit in significant historical events. So as well in Laudato Si, Pope Francis now speaks about by learning to see and appreciate beauty, where learn to reject self-interested pragmatism. So my point of view is that with help of another thinker of 20th century theologian and philosopher Romano Guardini, I trying to use his writings for this methodology, how to gaze church, the space of disused churches. And this is my point, that we don't need to that the churches, that spaces is already monument, you know, it's already something to observe, it's already the heritage. And I want to insert that spaces of these churches to the already existing now for ritual and spiritual practice churches community, you know. This is I don't want to use these spaces for something what is not inserted in the tradition. Now I try to look by this gaze of limpid gaze of Romano Guardini to find out that it's not the content but the form, the most important thing. And from this gaze, participation in the space, which is already particular, we can find out as well the function, which is just to be involved in what is happening with that space. And from this is going the fruits to bear the fruits. So this is my presentation. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Ruta. And the last and the third one is Anna KÖRS from Hamburg. The screen is yours.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Anna KÖRS. I'm a sociologist and I'm vice director of the Academy of World Religions at the University of Hamburg in Germany. In my presentation, I would like to draw your attention to a yet widely unconsidered form of reusing churches, that is their interreligious reuse, and in particular, their reuse as a mosque by a Muslim community. And I argue that in an increasingly plural society, the reusing of a church as a mosque can have a bridge building potential and should thus be more included into the discourse around the reusing of churches. For this, I will introduce the so far single case of a transformation of a church building of one of the two mainline Christian churches in Germany, that is the transformation of the former Protestant Capernaum church in today's Al-Nur Mosque that happened in the city of Hamburg. The Capernaum church you see here had been run since the 1960s by a Protestant Lutheran community which merged because of membership decline in 2002. The church building was then decommissioned and in 2005 sold to an investor who planned the reusing as a social facility for children's care, which however he did not realize, so that the building remained vacant and increasingly decayed in the course of the years, as you can see here on the right. Years later, in 2013, it became known through the press that the investor sold the former Capernaum church to a Muslim community who wanted to convert it into a mosque. The Al-Nur community, based in Hamburg since 1993, had been looking for space for years because it was housed in a place that was not suitable, not to mention representative. There was an underground car park, as you see here, what is not the exception, but just the normal case. In Hamburg, for example, there is one representative mosque and more than 60 Muslim communities that are invisible, being located in former warehouses, commercial premises, sports facilities, offices, and all kinds of different locations. This imbalance between presence and representation of non-Christian and especially Muslim communities is similarly evident in many European cities. Their invisibility is certainly related to legal, financial, and other aspects, but above all, their lack of social recognition. In Hamburg, too, the church-mosque conversion triggered a societal discourse that was by no means free of conflict. Church officials initially saw it as a quotation, a spiritual imposition, a breach of the dam, or a mishap. According to the legal regulations of both the Protestant and the Catholic churches in Germany, the reusing of a church as a mosque is prohibited. In other words, if the church had a choice, it would not have allowed the sale of the church building to a Muslim community. This could only happen because the investor sold it to them. However, on the whole, the further process was very productive. And when the former church was reopened as a mosque in 2018, it was celebrated also by the Protestant church as, quotation, a beacon project of interreligious dialogue. This reinterpretation is based both on material and social aspects. As considering the outside of the building and the structural redesign of the mosque, it was most important that the exterior of the building remained largely unchanged. The chairman of the mosque community explained from the very beginning that with the reuse as a mosque, one also wanted to preserve a listed church. Therefore, the redesign followed the motto, church on the outside, mosque on the inside. This motto went so far that at the end of the construction process in 2018, even the cross on the roof of the former church tower was not replaced by a crescent moon as symbol of Islam, but by the lettering Allah as the Arabic word for God. This is unique, not known from any mosque in the world, and can be interpreted as the Muslims community's will to integrate into majority Christian society. In addition to these material aspects, also social and contextual factors were at least as important. First, the Al-Nur community behaved in a very cooperative way from the beginning on, seeking the contact with religious communities, politicians, as well as the neighborhood. Remarkably, the former local Protestant church community did not follow the initial interpretation of the church representatives, but instead backed the Al-Nur community and even ensured openness and participation in the neighborhood through its own networks. Second, the Muslim community itself is extremely heterogeneous and has long been involved in interreligious dialogue with other religious communities as well as with society. And third, Hamburg is so far the only federal state in Germany that has concluded so-called state treaties with the Muslim communities for their legal recognition, so that their integration into urban society was already well advanced and the church mosque transformation kind of fit into the context. This case shows, and I come to my conclusion, that a church mosque conversion can apparently not only work, but can also be a step toward mutual understanding between religious communities as well as with society. However, the case also shows that the success of such a process demands a lot from all sides. To be clear, I do not mean to block out the difficulties of such an interreligious reuse, nor do I want to suggest this specific forum as a model. From my empirical research, I know that churches are highly symbolic and emotional places. Yet at the same time, their societal significance is also based on the variance and changing of meanings corresponding with the transformations of religious forms and beliefs in society. In this sense, the church conversions are not only an expression of social development and make secularization visible, they are also promoters of future social developments. And in particular, the church mosque conversion can contribute to the perception and maybe also the advocacy of a religiously plural society. So I'm looking forward to your comments, questions, and I myself would be very interested to learn more about how this specific church mosque conversion is dealt with in other countries, and also whether there's any ongoing research on this. So thank you very much.
Okay, Anna, thank you. I see some questions, not so many, but the most, I see 3-4 questions or remarks are on the mosque thema. I have, as a chair, perhaps the privilege to start with one question for Maria and one for RÖTA, and then I will address the presentation of Anna through the questions and the remarks on the chat. First for Maria, I see that your project is about the church of the Church of Sweden and also used as a museum. In culture studies and also in religious studies, there is a debate on the musealization of religion and the religionalizing of the museum. Perhaps you have heard about that. When you use a church also as a museum, doesn't that promote the musealization of religion, in your opinion?
I would say in the specific case that I was looking at, this collaboration between a regional museum and the parish, well, it was actually so that the actual exhibitions that took place in the church, did not involve religious objects or sort of a religious material. It was rather that they, well, one example was a photography exhibition, which featured community members from this village where the church is located. So you could take part in their everyday life and so on. So it was more of a way of trying to open the church, have it more active, and also to kind of integrate the secular cultural heritage of this region with the space of the church. So in this specific case, there wasn't such a conflict, and the parish that owns the church, they were very, very positive for these to these kind of activities, as it was still a church. It was only an extended use of the building.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to you because I see more questions for your presentation. But first, I go to RÜTA. A question for you from my side is, I know a little bit about the situation in Rome and a little bit about the reluctance of the Roman Catholic Church to use churches outside liturgical use. There was in Rome the Amazon Synod, you know about that, and there was in the city of Rome the use of certain churches, not only as a liturgical place, but also for discussion, for debate, for all kinds of activities. And there was a lot of debate on this use in the center of Rome near the Vatican. And there was also a lot of critics towards Pope Francis, who was very mild in his approach of these uses of the churches. What is your opinion about this dichotomy in the Roman Catholic Church? For on the one hand, an open use of spaces, as you have said, also in a social perspective, and on the other side, in the same Catholic Church, there's a lot of debate of the sacred liturgical profile of the churches.
Thank you for the question. As I showed in my slides, that the point of view, like the message of Pope Francis for this conference was underlined the function of cultural and social function of the building. So I suppose that in Rome there is support for this cultural use of building, for museum, for the galleries. So it's not so open for other functions, but for the, I don't know, that social as more social functions, but for cultural point of view, this is accepted, but not so open. It's more conservation, preservation of this building, like the restoration and preservation of the liturgical vessels and artworks. It's more about this management of heritage, but not about the use of the space, you know. So this is maybe a different point of view, and I suppose that the church not already discussed about the more alternative functions of space of disused churches. It's still about the musealization, about the galleries, and it's not about thinking what we can receive from this building as well for our tradition. So it's not contemplation, as I underlined. So it's a little bit, it needs a process in the Catholic Church. I suppose that it's too much traditional point of view, and it's true that they are not come deeper to this situation, actual situation, you know, how we can in the total world, you know, to move. So that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you. And now for Anna, I have a lot of remarks and questions, and I present it to you, and then you can react on them. First, people are suggesting that perhaps there is no question of an option for redundant churches, transforming them in a mosque, because it's prohibit. So what is the perspective here? And also people want to know more about in the world, what are the figures, how many churches, and especially Catholic churches, are transformed into a mosque, and also outside the Catholic perspective, how are things about the other Christian denominations? Are there examples of Protestant churches transformed into a mosque? And one colleague of mine is suggesting that you can also find in the Netherlands some examples. In Amsterdam is a fine example. And there's also the remark in the chat, does the reuse of a church into a mosque also contribute to the interfaith dialogue? So can it be a perspective there? So a lot of remarks and perspectives, but also questions about to know a little bit more about this transformation of churches into mosques.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I try to give some answers. The first one, whether it's an option at all, because the regulations, both of the Protestant and Catholic Church, as I said, prohibit this form of conversion of a church into a mosque. So actually, it's no option, one must say. But since it happened in Hamburg by accident, so to say, I think it's of course it won't be a perspective that will be fostered or supported by the church representatives and the officials. This we saw in Hamburg wasn't the case even here in this city, but if at all, then it must come from bottom up. From the people of the churches or the congregations and the communities. So up to now, there was the second question, how many cases we have in Germany. This is the single case. So it's a unique case in Germany that this transformation actually took place. And if we stay with the regulations, there won't be any other case. And that is my point to say. I mean, isn't that a chance we couldn't use to think about it, just to think about it and to discuss about it? Because I don't find it in all the discussions about reusing churches. Nobody talks about interreligious reusing of churches. And I just wondered, could this example in Hamburg that turned out to be a success, could have been different, of course, but in Hamburg, it turned out to be a success, and it did contribute to interreligious dialogue and interfaith understanding. Couldn't this be a good reason to further think about this? And there are some other cases, and I just had a look here on my screen.
Yeah, London is mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, also in Germany, there have been a few cases of conversion of a church building into a mosque, but not by the mainline Christian churches, so not by the Protestant and Catholic churches, but by Christian minorities, like the New Apostolic Church or the Protestant Methodist Church and other churches that happen in Hamburg and Berlin, in Mönchengladbach. So there are cases where a former church building of a Christian minority was given to a Muslim community, but not by the mainline Christian churches. Yeah, and I think that was the questions.
Yes.
And yeah, thanks for the one in Amsterdam. I guess I know this example, and I know also some research on this. So if there are other cases in other countries or any research going on, I would be very interested in that.
Yeah, there are all kinds of suggestions in the chat, so you can
find
them there. I see London,
Great.
and I would also would mention the concept of sharing ritual liturgical space. That's a hot item at this moment in interreligious studies. So there are a lot of places also in history where Muslims and Christians share the same space. So that, there you find many examples of using together the same space. It's in Ephesus, it's in the Balkan. There are many places. There are many studies about that. Kurukli is a name. Frau Kurukli is a famous name who has studied and make an inventory of all these sharing of ritual space. Also in Indonesia, I have a whole dossier of places like this. And this is, of course, an interesting contextual element. I myself was a little bit shocked by the survey presented in the session in session 2, where there was a German survey I've noticed, and 40% find it not acceptable that the redundant church is used for space by non-Christian religions. So that is perhaps an important signal where the problem lies. So there is not much.
39% did find it acceptable, right?
Yes, but
yes,
40% not. So you see what I mean? For 40% it was not acceptable.
Okay, but I mean, then even 60% would find it acceptable.
Yes, but
I mean that's more than found it acceptable for socials, for some social.
Yes, but perhaps I have to look to this figure, but I saw it as an in relation with other functions, and then it came rather low in the acceptable range.
I find it quite a lot. I mean,
okay,
if we have a look at the surveys.
You're optimistic, perhaps, yes, but I'm old. Yeah. Let's go to Sweden. I saw some remarks or questions for Maria, and I have them here regarding Hamra. I think the Church's Conservation Trust was involved in the project, and I wondered how this helped with this project or not. Maria.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. The Church's Conservation Trust were well, they were a project partner, you could say, I guess, in the pilot project to the kind of final project in Hamra. I think that the Church's Conservation Trust was a great inspiration for this project. I know there were plans of having activities that were, you could say, closer to those of the Church's Conservation Trust, such as champing, the church camping. In the end, I believe that they sort of stuck to activities that were more sort of familiar for a museum to arrange. But I do think the setup and the ideas of the Church's Conservation Trust was very influential, and I know that it influenced the local parish here, the parish of NYSTRÖM as well. So I know that these are ideas that they have with them today, and that they want to keep on working with and adapting to kind of the Swedish context as well.
Can you say something about that foundation, the Church's Conservation Trust? What are they doing? Is it a heritage trust, or is it something by the Church of Sweden?
The Church's Conservation Trust?
The Church's Conservation Trust, yes.
If they are here, if a representative of the Church's Conservation Trust are here, maybe it's better if they present themselves. It's in English.
We have only the
chat.
You
only have the chat. It's in
Tonight,
English.
in the discussion rooms, we can talk with each other.
Yes. So yeah, I just don't want to kind of present them in the wrong way, but it's an English organization
Okay.
that works with parishes and churches. Maybe they are writing something, I don't know. Yeah, that are rarely used, or I don't know if they, I don't think they work with deconsecrated churches. Maybe they do. But I think that one important part of their work is that the church is still consecrated and has an extended use, and is very much community based. So it's very much seeing how the church and this public space of the church can be used for the local community.
Yeah.
So this perspective is very important, I think, also in the Swedish context.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, another question for you. How do you see the future of Hamra Church and other similar churches in Sweden? Is the current legal protection adequate for future use?
Yeah, I don't think the if you look at the project in Hamra, the legal protection is I would say the legal protection is not quite relevant for this project. It didn't involve any material transformation of the church. The extended uses were kind of minor, and they were done also in collaboration with the parish. So in that sense, it was very uncontroversial from a legal point of view. These rural churches of Sweden, they are very complicated. This church in Hamra is very typical, as it is in a very good material condition, but it is closed most of the time. So I think the social aspects here are the most important. And this kind of inspiration that was also put forward from the Church's Conservation Trust, the kind of the community connection to these churches. So I think you always need to kind of find context-specific solutions to see what are you going to, how are you going to get these churches to be more integrated with the local community, and how do you get them to stay open? I think you need to kind of start with the needs of the parish and the local community.
Okay, thank you. I see a lot of chats and input regarding the double religious use of churches, and I see many suggestions for looking at the context. For instance, what's happening with the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. That's also an interesting case of transforming a church into a mosque and a mosque into a church, and now again in a mosque with a very outspoken profile. The chat I see speaks of domination rather than interreligious dialogue, and I think that's true. I see also mentioned that there is a long tradition also in Germany of the so-called simultaneum, that is the double use of a church building. I remember a simultaneum still existing in Sorbia, in Bautzen, in eastern Germany, where the church is has a fence in the middle of the church, and there are two parts for different uses of religious traditions. I see mosque in Scotland, so there is a lot of material, Anna, for you. But I see also a critical remark. Let's see them. Yes, here, a traditional church expresses a Christian perception. Doesn't that make it difficult to turn it into a mosque? I think you've heard that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm reading all these interesting comments in the chat. Maybe it's possible to copy the chat, because there are so many hints in it. Yeah, the theological reasoning for this, of course, I mean, I'm not a theologian, I'm a sociologist. So it's, of course, I would say it's difficult. But I cannot, I cannot give a theological argument for this. But I just wanted to say that, or show that this example in Hamburg, that it can function and it can support interreligious dialogue as it did in Hamburg through all the activities. That was also a question in the chat I saw, how did this function? Through all the social activities that were started, and that were started by the Muslim community, but also by the local Protestant community, and by the neighborhood, and by many other people. So there were so many activities going on. And in the end, as I showed, or they set up this event series called Dialogue on the Construction Site, where they invited people from the neighborhood or from the city and just got in contact with them and talked about the process that's going on. And so and in the end, they got a prize for interreligious dialogue and so on. Of course, one can be critical against this or about this, and it's also a form of legitimization of this conversion of a church into a mosque. But I think it also contributed to the dialogue on site and at the local side with the people that were involved, and also helped, of course, the Muslim community to get recognized and to get recognized in society, not only by the church community, but also in society. And of course, I would also say that the Hamburg context is a specific one, and it's not, you cannot take this example and try to copy it in another city, or it's a very specific case, I would say, but it's I think it's reason enough to just to think about if this could be an option, maybe in one other city. Yeah.
I see also regarding the context of the mosque case, that in Germany, in German-speaking Europe, you have that Houses der Religionen in Bern, the House of One in Berlin, Hanover, and that's also a sign that people are looking for using space for many religious tradition and not only the Christian traditions.
Yeah. I think that's a different development, because this development is, I mean, that's this House of One is a sacred building, or a planned sacred building in Berlin, with a church, a mosque, and a synagogue under one roof, so to say.
Yes, I know.
And we also have interreligious gardens of religion, that are planned in a similar way. And of course, we also have all the interreligious rooms within public institutions like universities, airports, and so on and so on. But I would always say that this conversion of a church into a mosque is the most authentic case we can have for interreligious, maybe not dialogue, but interreligious understanding or interreligious negotiations. So I would always say this is something specific and something different than the House of One in Berlin, or than the rooms for interreligious rooms we have within other rooms that are not visible for the outside.
Yes, you are right, and I've mentioned it only as a context element.
Yeah.
Yes, perhaps RÜTA, perhaps you can say something. I see 3 or 4 chats about Eastern Europe. Do you know something about the situation there? So people are saying that there you see that Lutheran or Catholic churches are opened for the Orthodox tradition. Do you know something about that? Or is in Lithuania and in Vilnius, is it the situation of secularized buildings re-entered the religious domain?
In Lithuania, we have majority Catholic church, so so it's not the case of Protestant and Orthodox use, but of course in Lithuania we have many churches of of Orthodox, which is used for Lutheran and so on. So, but this practice, you know, in the history, then you are on the cross of the dominations, it's natural. But another question which I would like to reflect about this case of that churches, which I showed about how they dealing with the interventions of Cyber regime in the building, you know, that the communities which are now trying to revival these spaces of for long disused churches, and how they deal with this already made as, for example, elevation, you know, elevation for warehouse and for the stuff. And you know, there are many as well reflections. They do not want to eliminate that historical thing. So they want what to do to reflect on, for example, to make this elevation as spiritual elevation, to make it transparent. So this is, you know, I suppose we think we should to think about how to make more symbolism in our churches, to think, to reflect of what is happening, not to eliminate what was done already, but to let people to think on this, you know. And in Lithuania, they are thinking about this. We are reflecting of what is happening, our wounds of historical ones. And I suppose that this is double loss, you know, as in Lithuania, we already have 30 years ago, we had this occupation, you know, and we had this transformation of churches, and still now in the West Europe is thinking how to transform this. So it's double loss, you know. And I think it's not mature already in Lithuania. We are not thinking about this situation on the theology and of the cultural heritage point of view, and how to study this already done. But we are very, as I say, we are transparent and very fragile to the situation. So it's not moving very fast of transformation. This is little by little on little reflection, but we need intellectual, you know, issues to how to study this points of view, because it's little examples, just few examples on the recent situation. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I have a look at the time, and I think we have to close this poster presentation, because we need, I think, a little coffee break before we go on with the conference. I have one suggestion for people, and perhaps especially the poster presentators. You can save the chats. You can go to the right bottom, you see 2 points there, and then there is a save function. So you can save all the, I think 80, how many are there? At most 102 interesting chats with all kinds of suggestions also. You can save them in a special file, and you can use them in your study. Many thanks for your presentations. All the best with your career and your projects in reusing churches. And I now close this session, and I thank also the 101 attendants in this poster presentation session. Thank you.